All right, I want to talk about the Iowa lineup for the 2025-26 season because there's not a lot of questions, actually. There's maybe a question, and it is how do they fill the 57 through 74 range, right? We feel pretty certain on the other weight classes, and I'll go through them all, and then we'll kind of circle back to the big question and why I think a lot of people are maybe getting an aspect of this wrong, or they're not calculating some of the risk involved with what's being suggested. But 125 is going to be Dean Peterson. He transferred from Rutgers. They brought him in. He's going to be their 25-pounder. 33, Jerick Ayala, NCAA finalist at 25 and 33. He's going to do great. 41, Nasir Bailey, a transfer from Little Rock, looks to be his weight class. And 49, Jordan Williams, another Little Rock transfer. Now, the question is at 57, really. And they've got Miguel Estrada. They've got Victor Voinovich that are solid options. These are guys that are going to get to the tournament. I feel pretty confident. The question is there upside beyond that? Right now, you can't say that there's nothing to say, yes, these guys are going to be All-Americans or high finishers at the NCAA tournament. They're going to be solid. They're going to be tough outs, but there's nothing to suggest they're going to be guys on the podium next year for the Hawks at 157. And then at 65 on up, you've got Michael Caliendo, you got Patrick Kennedy at 74, 84 Angelo Ferrari, 97 you've got the transfer of Indine, and then at heavyweight you have Ben Keeter back. Now, the big question, the big point in all this is the name I didn't say yet is Gabe Arnold. And for Iowa fans, they're like, how are we going to get this guy in the lineup? It's like, well, obviously, we're just going to cut all these guys down. We're going to cut down Michael Caliendo. We're going to cut down Patrick Kennedy, and we're going to slide Gabe Arnold in at 174, and then everything fits perfectly, right? And on paper, if it's an MLB or a NBA lineup, yeah, you just slide this guy to the small forward, and then you get them all on the floor, whatever. But this is wrestling, and it's different, and I think there's considerations not being considered. And when you look at someone like Michael Caliendo and you look at Patrick Kennedy, they're not factoring in the risk of dropping these guys down a weight. They're not factoring in how well these guys are wrestling. And of course, I'm talking about dropping Michael Caliendo down to 157 pounds. And if you're saying drop him down to 157, here's what you're actually saying. A guy, Michael Caliendo, who has been, if you look at him, has he been the most consistent Iowa Hawkeye over the last 2 years? I would suggest yes. He is a guy who over the last 2 seasons has only lost to NCAA champions. Those are the only guys that beat him. He beats everyone else, okay? He has finished 7th, 4th, and 2nd in his 3 years, his only 3 years of competition. In that time, it's so crazy, he's only lost to one wrestler that didn't ultimately win an NCAA title, Carson Hartslow. That's the worst loss of his entire wrestling career at the NCAA level. That's how good Michael Caliendo has been. Oh, by the way, his bonus rate has increased every single year. 2 years ago, it was at 50%. Last year, 66%. He was the number 2 ranked guy all last year. No one beat him other than the great Mitchell Messenbrink, who might be on the world team this year. Who, Michael Caliendo, if you look at his last 2 matches, he did a better job of keeping Mitchell off his legs than David Carr did at the U.S. Open. Okay, that's how high a level Michael Caliendo is wrestling at. So you're saying, hey, take all that success you're having, and now let's lose 8 pounds. Let's get a lot smaller. Let's lose maybe a little bit of that pop, a little bit of that muscle, and drop down into a weight class where, yes, you can win a national title, but I would say there's more challenges there. It's going to be really, really tough, and you are one of the title contenders. But if Michael Caliendo goes down to 157, I'm not saying, oh yeah, Michael Caliendo is without a doubt an NCAA finalist or an NCAA champion. I don't know that. I think he could. It's not a guarantee. Whereas at 165, no, maybe he's not going to win. But who's going to beat him? Who's going to keep him, other than Mitchell, who's going to keep him out of the NCAA finals next year? That would surprise me. And so you're saying, hey, you need to drop down the weight so that Patrick Kennedy can drop down, so that Gabe Arnold can get in. Because now, all right, let's go to Kennedy. Patrick Kennedy gets on the podium, finishes 4th, is going to be the preseason number 2 guy in America. Okay? You're going to tell him, hey, you need to go down, you need to cut weight too to go down to 165 so that Gabe Arnold can get in there. Well, if I'm Patrick Kennedy, it's like, I just got on the podium. I got it going. And now I got to drop weight. Now I don't know. So you're risking, you're taking 2 guys out of their optimal weight class where not only is it optimal for them, they are high performers. 2nd place and 4th place. And now both ranked 2nd. You're sliding them both down, risk, to get in Gabe Arnold, who we all think is really, really good. But the reality is he was in the round of 16 last year. He got pinned by a non-All-Americans. He was not as productive factually as Michael Caliendo and Patrick Kennedy. So the whole move is predicated on getting a guy in who was less productive. So you're taking your most productive guys and they have to change course to get Gabe Arnold in. Now, I understand for a lineup synergy standpoint, if you look at it on paper, I understand the conclusion. I understand what makes sense about it. But if you look at it just realistically, pragmatically, from an actual results on the mat standpoint, there's questions, there's risk there. And I think that risk is not being factored in. Now, if you tell me, hey, Michael Caliendo and Patrick Kennedy, they are so small for 165 and 174, and this weight cut is a non-factor. They're going to be just as productive at 157 and 165 as they were at 65 and 74. They say, okay, yeah, that's great. But that's not known. And if that were the case, maybe they would have been there in years previous. If that was their best weight, why weren't they there? And you could say, well, Ja'Cory Teemer was there or this, that. But they brought in Ja'Cory Teemer late last year. Very late, right? So if 157 was such a good weight for him, they could have done this a year ago, right? They could have had Caliendo at 57, Kennedy at 65, Gabe at 74, and then they could have rolled out Angelo at 184. They could have done this all last year if it was their best weight, but I don't think it was their best weight. That's why they had to go bring in Ja'Cory. Because otherwise, it was September before Ja'Cory got there? It was right before the season began. So I say all of this to say, while on paper it could make sense, I think you have to, at minimum, factor in the risks of dropping 2 of your most productive guys into weight classes where they have not either had any success or not the same level of success. And that's my thoughts on dropping them down. Now, there's no question about it. If you just look at where these guys will be ranked on paper, you make this work, it's a really, really good lineup. There's no doubt about it. And Iowa has not brought in a 57, right? There have been 57s on the market. There have been 57s that would make them better, right? Ethan Miller would have made them better at 157 pounds. There's others that have been in the mix. And if they don't go after a 57, maybe they are leaning that way. Maybe that is the thought. And I think another aspect of this that is maybe not, I think people look at these teams and they think the coaches say, hey, you got to go down, you got to move this. And they don't really move the pieces probably as much as you think. The athletes generally are sort of dictating this and making those moves on their own. Now, there are instances where the coach says, hey, we need you down here. This is where the team needs you. But generally, especially with these higher level guys, they let it kind of be their own idea. And I think that's how it works at Iowa. So we'll see what they end up doing. There's no doubt that the Iowa Hawkeyes are going to have a very strong team next year. They're going to be ranked at every single weight class. They're going to have guys that can score big points at every single weight class. There's going to be questions, right? They're brought in 4 transfers that have not placed at the NCAA tournament or didn't last year, right? Nasir Bailey did 2 years ago, but they brought in Dean, Nasir, Jordan Williams. These guys did not place last year at NCAAs. And Dean, 3-time D3 champ, but how does that translate to D1? That's the big question. We don't know. So there's still going to be a lot of questions, but there's no question there's a lot of talent in Iowa City and a lot of reason to be excited to watch the Iowa Hawkeyes next year. So I want to hear from you. What do you think the Hawks should do next year. 157, 165, 174. Should they cut those guys down to slide in Gabe Arnold? That's the question I have. What do you think they should, and what do you think they will do at Iowa?